You're sharing a room with maybe 1 or 2 other women. So that is actually really quite crazy for me to hear as an American.
This is a little thing that we got from our midwife.
Tanner cut the umbilical cord much shorter than they did here.
Which, when we compare that to our birth back in the States, we had the first 2 days in the hospital, like I mentioned before, and then we went home, and Risa didn't see a doctor for another 6 weeks.
In today's video, we're going to be talking about our postpartum experience here in Germany, and then we're going to compare that to our postpartum experience back when we had Willa in the US. But first, if you haven't watched our latest 2 videos, you're going to want to do that. We share our surprising German home birth story. We did not plan for it, but it was unassisted. It sounds intense, and honestly, things happened really fast, but it was also a very gentle, safe, and spiritual experience. We will forever treasure the memories that took place on that day as a family of 4.
Eyes are open.
In our latest video, we give an insight into what the first week was like with a newborn. We celebrate Noah's start of life, share the meaning behind her name, and take you with us on the incredible, beautiful transition to becoming a family of 4.
Happy birthday, dear baby. Happy birthday to you. Keep going.
You got it.
Oh yeah, nice job, sweetie.
Okay, so let's dive into our postpartum experience here in Germany. And I think the best place for us to start would be right after Noah's birth. So, technically, right after Noah was born, our midwife was not here. That was a very unique and, like I said, surprising experience for us. However, now that we know everything went safe and soundly, it's really cool that Tanner and I had 15 minutes of uninterrupted time. Right after Noah was born and he passed her through my legs, we just had this very special moment where the 2 of us were kneeling on the ground with Noah in my arms, and we were just reflecting back on everything that had just transpired there in our living room in Germany. Our midwife had previously given us instructions that if by the chance we were to give birth unassisted, that we shouldn't worry about the placenta or the cord, just let things happen on their own time. So that's exactly what we did. Tanner went and got a towel to put on Noah to keep her warm. And then truly, like I said, we just sat there and marveled at this moment and looked down at our little baby girl and took her in. After about 10 minutes after birth, my mom, aka Willa's grandma, went up to go and get Willa to have her meet her baby sister for the first time. That was definitely a special moment and really our first time with all of us being there together as a family of 4. So at this point, let's stop there and compare this to our experience back in the States. Things are very different. Oh, little sis is waking up. For starters, I gave birth to Willa in a hospital, so definitely a different setting. My primary care provider, though, was in fact a midwife. She was also a nurse practitioner, but still my main preference was to have a midwife attending to me. Hi. Sorry, mom duty's call. Hi. So anyways, with Willa, I actually birthed her on the back at the hospital, and then it was the midwife who caught the baby. Right after that, Willa was placed right onto my chest, so that was very similar to as it was with Noah. However, it didn't last very long because they told me that she got too cold, and so she had to go under the heater. That was a bit of a letdown because I was really looking forward to having that like golden hour and that time with her, but it just didn't work out as planned. Okay, so let's jump back to Germany now. We're gonna be doing a little bit of back and forth. So where I last left off, the midwife hasn't come, but she did come very shortly after. And when she got here, her and Tanner helped lift me up onto the couch, and my placenta actually was still in me. The cord is attached to Noah, and Noah was in my arms. Once I was on the couch, I birthed the placenta very shortly after. And then after that, Noah and I had this amazing uninterrupted time where we just did skin to skin and started off our breastfeeding journey. About 40 minutes after that, Tanner got to cut the umbilical cord, and that experience was quite unique. And the reason for that was because back in the States, Tanner cut the umbilical cord much shorter than they did here. So after talking to the midwife, she just said she chose the thinnest part because if it was left untouched and no medical intervention was taking place, that's where naturally the umbilical cord would have broken off. So kind of cool. I do have to admit that once the umbilical cord dried up, it was harder to get Noah undressed and dressed just because it was kind of in the way, and we didn't want to hurt her, and I felt like it was going to pull out. Obviously, ours was a home birth, so any of you Germans listening in, where do they cut the umbilical cord in the hospitals? Is it shorter or is it longer? Kind of an odd question, but I'm curious to know. Like I mentioned, Tanner was also able to cut Willa's umbilical cord back in the States, so that's the same. They really like to let the partner be involved in that process. However, during that whole process, I just wasn't able to spend a lot of time with Willa because I actually tore Willa, and so there was just a lot of things going on. A lot of people in the room. I was getting stitches. The environment was just different, right? In Germany, I actually tore as well. And none of us expected that because I was so intuitively listening to my body. But I did tear. It was a fairly easy stitching process, but my midwife did wear like her own headlamp, and the lights were able to be dimmed, so I still felt comfortable. Our midwife came with all of the proper pain medication, the numbing creams. I didn't feel any of the pain from the stitches, so that was very similar to like hospital and home birth experience. Just a bit more comfortable being in our home and in our living room. We can't speak for what it would be like in the German hospital, so I would love to hear from you guys how that experience typically goes. Do German mothers go to a separate room to birth their baby, or does it all take place in the same room? From what we've heard from some of our American and German friends who have given birth here in Germany, is that oftentimes at least postpartum, after the birth of the baby, you're sharing a room with maybe 1 or 2 other women. So that is actually really quite crazy for me to hear as an American, because you definitely get your own room in the hospital. At least we did with Willa, and I've never heard of anyone having to share a room. When we first got to the hospital with Willa, they put us in a room where we labored and birthed Willa, and then we were in that room for probably like 2 hours, and then at that point they transferred us to like the maternity ward with all postpartum care. You labor and birth in the same room, and they get transferred to a different floor where then you are with other women, or how does that work? This is probably common practice anywhere you are, but after you give birth, your uterus starts contracting back to its normal size, and most times it doesn't come without assistance. So even here at our house, our midwife would feel on my stomach and see where the uterus was, give a little bit of a massage. She was very light and gentle though. Back in the States, the nurses were still relatively gentle and soft, but I do have horror stories from some of my American friends and even some of my sister-in-laws that just said that was so painful, and that their nurses were really quite intense when they would push on the uterus and didn't seem to be as attentive. So again, I'd love to hear how that is handled here in Germany. Of course, it's kind of a painful experience however you slice it. Eventually here in Germany, Tanner and Willa did get to hold Noah, and that was a special moment for them. Willa was so cute. She grabbed her little camera and started taking pictures of Noah. She was the little photographer, and that was really fun and special to see. Truly, all of our medical care was completed right here in our living room in Germany. Before the midwife would leave our home, she made it mandatory for me to go to the bathroom and urinate. She said that was an absolute must. I had to do that. If not, she would have had to put a catheter in me. In the States with Willa, I do remember that being a focus as well, is just having to go to the bathroom and them tracking that. After that, she helped me into my bed, gave me a hug, said incredibly kind words, and left our family to just rest, relax, and soak in all of the incredible newness of having a baby. It's safe to say that the first day of our postpartum experience here in Germany was honestly as good as we could have ever hoped for or wished for. If we flash back to the States for one last time, Tanner actually went with Willa as a newborn baby to the nursery to go and run some tests. And I know at that moment he felt a little bit torn because, he didn't want to leave me, but going to be with Willa and soaking in her freshness was also a really special moment for him. And I do think that's quite common, is that they will allow the father to go into the nursery and kind of help them. I don't even know what tests they ran, but to let them be a part of that process. Some other things briefly to mention that just are now coming to my mind is that we waited like 2.5 hours after the skin to skin, after the breastfeeding, after everything, to weigh Noah and take her measurements, her height, weight, everything like that. Back in the States, at least our experience with Willa, they did those very quickly. It's like, baby's born, they cut the cord. For me, they did wait because I asked them to wait until the cord stopped pulsating with Willa. So they waited for that, and then I was able to do a little bit of skin to skin, but since she got cold, they put her on the warm heater, and then they took the measurements like at that moment. So it was just much different, and most times in the States, they are taking those measurements quite quickly. Even my mom asked the midwife here in Germany, like, are you gonna take her weight and height? And she's like, oh yeah, I will at some point. So my mom even was like, this is very different.
Looking back at our experience with Willa's birth, we spent the first 2 nights in the hospital. It was actually really nice to have the help, and as first-time parents, we definitely appreciated it. And it was fun to have family and friends come and visit us in the hospital while Risa was recovering. But having the birth at home here, I know we've said this several times, has just been incredible because we didn't feel rushed to leave to the hospital. We didn't feel rushed to go to a different room, to have to follow baby around to different places. It was just really nice being literally here on this couch in the living room and just really taking it slow. Now, what we found out is after the baby has been born, after that first day, the midwives will actually come and to check on mommy, to check on baby, to see if everything's okay, and they came to our house just like they did for the birth, which just makes sense, and it makes it extremely easier, especially for us, to not have to worry about leaving, to getting baby in the car seat, to have mom sitting in a car for 30 minutes or more. That was a really nice experience. They came for the first 3 days, which when we compare that to our birth back in the States, we had the first 2 days in the hospital, like I mentioned before, and then we went home, and Risa didn't see a doctor for another 6 weeks. Of course, she could have called and set up an appointment if she needed it, but it was like, once you left the hospital, that was it for a couple weeks. And looking back, it just seems a little crazy because there are many changes that happen when you have a new baby, and there's a lot of physical changes that are happening with Risa right now, and with women's bodies, just like all the changes they're going through. You would think that there would be more consecutive follow-ups after birth. Now for Willa, because she had high levels of jaundice, she was getting her heel pricked and her blood tested every few days. And unfortunately, we had to deal with some lights. She had a light blanket for the first week and a half of her life. And the lights were kind of an unfortunate situation for us because we weren't given a whole lot of instructions with the light. We thought that we had to put Willa just on the lights and we couldn't like wrap her up in it. Hindsight, we found out from some other people that that's what we could have done. Unfortunately, we lost a lot of time being able to hold her because she was on the light blanket for so many hours of the first few days of her life. Thankfully with Noah, we really don't have that problem right now. After a few days with just a visual look, she said everything's fine, that she does not have jaundice and there was nothing to really worry about. As I mentioned before, Risa had a midwife visit the first 3 days after birth, which is really awesome, and then periodically scheduled throughout the next few weeks. And from what we've heard, if a woman wants to have visits from a midwife further out, they can go as far as 12 weeks, which is absolutely amazing that there's that kind of support. We have a visit scheduled for 6 weeks out, where Risa just wants to make sure that we have a good visit to just double check on everything. But other than that, I think Risa has recovered quite well, and we're looking forward to just adjusting into this new phase of life. Now for Noah, she already had a few exams up to this date. She had the U1 or the U1 exam just within the first day or so after being born, and that was just a pretty simple exam here at the home. And our midwife took some blood samples to go send back to the lab. Blood test was taken for the blood group and to test for any metabolic diseases. And these tests are really important because if there are any issues or any problems, there's a higher chance that they'll be able to do something to make things better for the baby's life in the future if there is a disease. Within the first 10 days, we took her to the pediatrician where she had the U2 or the U2 exam. Got to see the pediatrician for the first time, checking weight, height, all those other measurements. We got more information about baby's care in the upcoming months, and we got more information about some of the immunizations that are available to us. If I remember correctly, I know that we had a lot more visits for Willa because of the jaundice, so it probably seems we did like an excessive amount of visits for Willa, understandably so, but I also feel like it was kind of early that we had immunizations for Willa. I could be wrong. I'd have to go back and look at those dates to confirm. But for whatever reason, it just seemed like it was a lot younger that they started with the immunizations back in the US. And based on what we have been told from our pediatrician, there are fewer immunizations that are recommended here in Germany compared to the US. And looking at the list of them, we can concur. One thing that was interesting at the pediatrician visit is that she gave us a prescription for vitamin D and fluoride tablets that we just dissolve in the breast milk or water and give to baby. It makes sense because we don't have a lot of sunlight during the winter months here in Germany, but I'm not entirely sure if we had fluoride for Willa. In the next few weeks, we have a couple other follow-up visits with the pediatrician and with the audiologist to have a hearing exam. So we'll see how those experiences go, but based on the visits that we've already had so far, we're really looking forward to the care that we're going to have for our baby. All right, and then one last thing that I wanted to mention is that this is a little thing that we got from our midwife. This is lamb wool, still with the fat. This is something that we were told we can put in between baby's legs, like the little leg rolls, to help with sores that are caused from like diaper rash and such. So a really cool remedy to have. She gave us a little bit and it's actually helped out quite a bit to reduce some of that rash and redness. So a fun little remedy that is unique to our experience here in Germany compared to when we were in the States with Willa.